Welcome to episode 196 of the Left Behind Game Club. This week, we play Wanderstop. Let's get right into it.
You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club.
Welcome to the Left Behind Game Club, our never-ending attempt to make sure that no game is left behind. I'm your host, Jacob McCourt, and today I have one friend with me. They are the host of Fun and Games and Reignite. It's Matt, aka Stormageddon. Hello.
Hi. I haven't been here in a little while, but I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, you are official friend of the show status.
Yeah.
Because you have been on this podcast so many times. So if you want to hear Matt Storm on other episodes, they have been on episode 86 about The Last of Us. Episode 161 about Yakuza, our second part. And then Coffee Talk was the last episode you were on.
Yes.
Weirdly enough, 166. You made the joke, beverage-based podcasts only, right?
I guess so. I mean, there are other beverage-based podcasts. I still haven't played Valhalla, though it's alphanumerical because it's spelled with like numbers too. But that's supposedly like a cyberpunk
I was
bar
like, what
similar.
does Assassin's Creed have to do with it? Jeez, Valhalla with the ones.
Yeah. So we'll have to do that one
you were
next.
also on our PAX West show.
I was.
Yeah, we should.
What was that PAX West show? That was that the panel?
No, that was so you've been on the audio versions of the panels that have been in the feed, but you've been on our 2022 mega show.
Oh,
when we started doing those
Oh,
shows
right,
with
when we
interviews.
wrapped
So you were
up
on
stuff.
that.
Yes, I remember.
You were on the GameCube panel that we did,
and I was on Trivia once.
And Trivia once. So you've been on at least 6 episodes. So 7 times the charm, I guess.
I guess so. Maybe we'll get it right this time.
Maybe. For folks who don't know about you, before we jump into Wanderstop, please let them know what you're all about.
Oh my God. I do podcasts, I guess. So I've been a podcaster and a DJ for like 13 years. I don't know. The number keeps going up. It's very weird. And right now, the 2 shows that I'm doing, as you mentioned, are Fun and Games, which is a general kind of topic-based gaming podcast that I do with the incredible Jeff Moonen. We cover all sorts of topics like grinding in games, the best soundtracks. We interview developers like our friends over at Mighty Yell. We've also interviewed composers like Grant Kirkhope. Who else have we've done a bunch of stuff. We talked to Yuri Lowenthal, not once but twice. He came back willingly. We'll never understand that. And it's just broad discussion based. And like Jacob's guested on many episodes, including our GameCube retrospective. We started doing like bi-monthly retrospectives of consoles that are voted on by our patrons, and that's been a lot of fun. And we have a guest for each of those. And then there's a sub feed or like a smaller show within that feed called Side Quests, which Jacob has done several episodes on, which is a different host talking about a game they love and why they love it. We are, as of recording, at episode 366, I think, which is ridiculous.
Wild.
And so that's great. And so if listeners, other podcasters, folks in other fields, anyone with a microphone wants to talk about, or a voice memo, wants to talk about a game they love and why they love it, they can reach out to me. We feature them on the show. My favorite episodes are when we have just a listener just come on to talk about a game they love, because that was kind of the whole impetus of the show. And then Reignite, real quick, started out as a Mass Effect show. I hosted with the incredible Frankie Bradley Lestrange. It was a Mass Effect play-along podcast where what if we made the decisions as if we were Shepard, and more importantly, what aliens we kissed if we were Shepard. A
very important question.
Very important question. We finished the trilogy. We went on to Andromeda, which I hadn't played, but my co-host had. That was a blast. I actually ended up really enjoying the game. And now we've moved on to the next logical step, which is Dragon Age. We're currently about like a third of the way through Dragon Age 2. We will cover the Veilguard. It's one of the few times in the history of that program that we've been current with any news cycle, because there was a new Dragon Age last year. And those are the only 2 I do now. I used to do some others. I stream occasionally, but those are the 2 kind of major things I do. I've been writing lately. You can read free articles on the Patreon. There might happen to be one about this that you can read after the podcast.
I will make sure to link a bunch of stuff, maybe the 3 episodes of Side Quest that I did, Kirby Superstar, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Psychonauts, one of the shows that I did about the GameCube on Fun and Games, and then I'll link that article about Wanderstop, because folks are going to want more tea after we are done spilling.
I see what you did there.
There it is. We brought it back.
Yeah.
Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I mentioned it off the hop, but we're going to talk about Wanderstop, developed by Ivy Road, published by Annapurna Interactive. This is available for PS5, Windows, Xbox Series X and S, and this is a hot, fresh, new one, not something we typically do on the podcast. We usually wait a year, but in this case, we needed that piping hot tea immediately. This one came out on February 24th of 2025. We start this podcast, like all of our podcasts, with the fast pitch. It is a one-sentence description of the game that we are about to talk about. Matt, as our guest, please start us off with your fast pitch.
You would think after all the times I guessed it on this show, I would have prepared this. I prepared my playtime, what platform, totally forgot about this part. No, why would we
let it roll?
Every time I get to the fast pitch, all I can think of is Katie always being flustered and like, I don't know, it's a whatever. Or making fun of you.
And then delivering something that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Or insulting to me.
Right, exactly. So my fast pitch for this game is, it is a game about making tea and self-reflection and dishing tea while self-reflecting.
That's good. I love that. I'm going to go not as good and shorter. Don't burn the tea while dealing with your burnout.
That's a good one too. I like that.
Off the hop, I think that I should say, and maybe you as well, I received a code for this one, so thanks to the team at Annapurna Interactive and Pop Agenda for setting that over. Matt, I believe you're in the same boat.
Correct. I also received a review code. Shout out to Ivy Road and, of course, their PR maven, the one and only Jenny as well.
Hell yeah. Disclosures! We both played this on PC. I played it in about 9.5 hours. I played it exclusively on my PC hooked up to a TV. How did you play this one, Matt, and how long did it take you?
So I also played it on PC. I did boot it up to start on Steam Deck, but ended up enjoying it more on my PC. I just liked having the bigger screen. And I played it. It took me about 15 hours and 30 minutes to finish. I did a bunch of the side quest, like content bonus stuff. And also I kind of just, as the game will insist, took my time.
And see, I think I played it in the wrong way, and we'll get into the reasons why a little bit later. But what I'd love to do maybe to start is just like set up the basics about Wanderstop. What is the game from a gameplay standpoint, and then sort of what is the immediate thrust or the first thrust when you start the game. Why don't you start, and then I'll help you fill it in.
Sure. So this game at a broad glance is a farming sim, lifestyle sim style game. In this particular game, you'll be making and serving tea to customers. I actually, when first seeing trailers for it, went, this wasn't for me because I saw it was a sim game. And while there's nothing wrong with those kinds of games, most games like that, like Stardew Valley and Potion Permit, like I burn out on them. I burn out on them pretty quick on my own because I get overwhelmed by the options of what to make and how to progress, especially Stardew if I'm playing it single player. And so I wasn't super interested in this. We'll get into why I was interested in it as we go through the pedigree and expectations. But basically, the gameplay side of it, you're going to be growing plants, grabbing seeds to make more complicated plants, to then grab fruit, and to make tea. You also cut down tea leaf bushes to get tea balls. And then between making all of these things and mixing them together, you will then use a giant contraption in which you make tea. And then also part of the gameplay is like cleaning up the area, and like you can like plant stuff for like the look and take pictures. And it's very much, if you've played any kind of lifestyle or restaurant sim, it is basically one of those at first glance mechanically.
Yeah, wildly cozy, and you can almost get, some of the elements are deep enough that you can get, not obsessed, but you can sort of lose yourself in the details of, you can make plants where you can not only create like small plants that create seeds, but you can then create plants that have fruit, and there's a certain amount of alchemy and math that goes into creating those. You can kind of get obsessed with the plant part of it, and the tea side of it. You can build a lot of different types of teas, some simple, some more complicated, and beyond that, you alluded to the fact that there were side quests as well beyond just customer comes, requests tea, you gather the ingredients, make tea. There is stuff like, hey, why don't you fill up our shop with a bunch of different flowers? Why don't you take pictures and put them on the wall? And so you can kind of get, you see from the difference in our play times. I played it because there's an item in the game called the Book of Answers.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I love about this game is you can kind of play it your way.
Mm-hmm.
And if your way is, hey, I'm actually not that interested in the whole tea making. I am interested at a surface level, but actually trying to figure out exactly the right taste by reading my book and looking through what the tastes are to figure out the right profile. That really wasn't what I was interested in, so I used the Book of Answers, and frankly, that's probably the difference in our playtimes, because I'm assuming that you did not use the Book of Answers the entire game, because I used it almost for every single tea that I had to make.
So yeah, I used it when I got particularly stuck. For those who haven't played the game, the Book of Answers is just a book that because you get a library because people send you books. There's actually a great fictional detective series within the game that was written and is very funny. But you have this place to display books, and one of the books in there that one of the characters shows you early on is the Book of Answers. And when you open it, it says the answers to all of your current quests, whatever they are, what are your current orders. And I used it a little, but the thing that I think makes the gameplay of this game better than other Sims that I've played like it is that this game, and we'll get into why later, encourages you to take your time. And to that end, none of the orders have a time limit. You can take multiple orders from multiple characters, and they just sit and they wait until you're done. And that's it. There's no rush to finish any quests, or, you can absolutely take your time. And I think that's why I enjoyed this game, because even when I was getting frustrated with the complication of an order or I screwed up an order, there was no rush or time limit. Like, I wasn't going to fail. There's really no fail.
No consequence either.
Right. There's no fail state or consequence. If you get something wrong, they just tell you this is what they wanted and you can try again. And I think that's what made the gameplay kind of even more relaxing than it already was. When we get into the presentation, there's more that adds to that. But at a basic gameplay level, I think because of those things, it made it really fun to engage with. And I never felt the pressure of from the game, I never felt the pressure of I need to finish this. I put my own pressure on myself for that because I wanted to write a review, and I've been doing those monthly for the Fun and Games Patreon. Shout out. But there was no real pressure from the game to rush through these orders, get stuff done as quick as you can.
I mean, even within making your tea orders, some orders can just be better. Yeah. Where you can give them a suboptimal tea and they'll still take it and drink it. Or some of them are just left to your interpretation, where it's, hey, this character wants whatever you want to give them, and so it's enjoyable and fun in that way. I think the thing we haven't done yet, and that we should probably jump into next, is the actual narrative that's at play here. Obviously, the center of the game is you come upon a tea shop, and you have to manage people's orders, manage the tea shop. But at the start of the game, I would say it was not what I was expecting, because you take on the role of Alta, who is a warrior who has essentially become the greatest warrior on the face of the planet. And at the start of the game is sort of just running through a forest. And, at a certain point, stumbles, can't pick up their sword. And, they come upon the tea shop where they meet Boro, who is sort of the owner and the person that runs this tea shop, and from there you figure out what the story is actually about. I don't know, did you feel with this one that it was what you expected at the outset? So
there are a few things here. In the initial trailer, when I saw it, I had no expectations other than this isn't a game for me. And then there was a preview cycle for this game, and to shout out friend of the show, Dave Jackson, they did a YouTube video for it. It was one of their first YouTube video previews. So I wanted to watch it, A, to support a friend and a collaborator, but also B, because I was curious about this game anyway. And in that preview, Dave went into the basics of the narrative, and I went, oh, and then also mentioned the pedigree of this game. It was written and directed by Davey Wreden, who has done the Stanley Parable and the Beginner's Guide. And though I am the only person on the planet who is still yet to play the Stanley Parable, I did play the Beginner's Guide, and it's one of the best video games I have ever played. So,
oh wow,
it's one of those, I can't tell you go play it. It's 2 hours long. So
I played the Stanley Parable, so you saying that about the beginner's guide, I'm like, okay, yep,
yeah. And I want to play the Stanley Parable. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But I was watching not to shout out another Jacob on your show, but Jacob Geller was doing a video on a bunch of games, and one of the games was the beginner's guide, and he paused his own video and said, "Hey, if you haven't played it, it's 2 hours long. Go play it, and then come back because I'm about to spoil the crap out of it." And I literally paused his video, bought the game, played it, and then went back. But anyway, knowing that pedigree and knowing that this was also a narrative about burnout and self-reflection, I went, okay, now I'm interested, because the beginning of the game, the thing that Jacob didn't mention is that this main character that you play as, Alta, is this undefeated warrior, but the whole opening of the game is her being defeated and then being like, that's it, dust yourself off, I'm going to be undefeated again, and then getting defeated again and again and again. And then she's like, all right, well, I just need to go train harder. So she's off running in the forest to find the best trainer in the world to train her so she can get back to the top again. Eventually can't carry her sword anymore, it becomes too heavy, then passes out. And so the story goes after that. And it is basically an analog for burnout, a thing that Jacob and I have talked about casually a lot. And so once I saw that that was what this game was about, I went, oh, okay, I need to play this game. And I reached out to Pop Agenda, and thankfully Jenny connected me with a code, and I was very excited because I went from literally being like, this is not a Matt game, to I'm really invested. And the story and the characters are definitely what did that. And as we go deeper into that, there are like side characters that I truly loved also. I highlighted some of them in my article, but like, to play a game like this, it needs a narrative like this. Stardew Valley has a perfectly fine narrative. There's nothing wrong with the Stardew Valley narrative. It's fun to fall in love and meet characters and do the festivals and stuff. But there's not the same level of intrigue in a game like Stardew Valley or Potion Permit that kept me interested. They are really great games that just weren't the right fit for me. Animal Crossing also, like I burned out on Animal Crossing the same way. It's like there's not a strong enough narrative hook to keep me going. This had that. I wanted to know what happened next to Alta and with Borrow and these other characters that we meet along the way. And that, I think, is the greatest strength of this game, possibly only next to how good it looks and how it sounds. But like for me, the story was like paramount and what made me want to play it.
Yep, I'm right there with you. Not to shout out our own content, but it was when Ivy Road was announced during an Annapurna Interactive. Not only are you getting Davey, who we know Davey's pedigree, but Carla Zamonja is also part of that, part of Ivy Road. And our episode 4 is an interview in this podcast feed with Carla. I have not listened to it back. I'm afraid to, because that was 7 years and hundreds of podcasts ago. But they were very cordial, and I've always been a big fan of their work, from the stuff they did at 2K Marin, to Fulbright working on Tacoma. And then, this being, obviously they've done other work as well. And then this game being sort of the first game they've done post Fulbright got me wildly excited. And I will tell you, and I mentioned this to you privately, but when I finished the game, realized what it was about, but not only that, made 1,000 notes about it. You were the first person I called because we've had this conversation about burnout before. And I was like, well, Matt and I are going to talk into a microphone about burnout for an hour with respect to Wanderstop. So here we go.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a thing that you and I have both struggled with, both publicly and privately. And so I think that it's definitely, I was definitely honored to be asked, and I'm happy to be here. I think also, while we were talking about the pedigree, I think it's also worth mentioning before we even get into the part that features it, C418 does the music for this. If that name sounds familiar, it's because they are the composer of Minecraft. They've done a bunch of other things besides Minecraft, but Minecraft is like the thing they're known for. And the minute I heard that they had done the soundtrack, I was like, oh, well, now I'm also in, because for those who are only hearing me for the first time, I'm a giant music nerd, and video game music is like the path to my brain. And so that also was another thing that was like, oh, they're involved, and there's something here, because they also don't score a ton of video games. Like,
no, they don't.
And so for them to be involved with this meant there was something special here.
Yeah, I'm such a huge fan of their music. For a little while, I remember going back and listening to one, which I think is maybe it is in Minecraft, maybe it's not. Oh no, it's in the documentary for Minecraft. I listened to their album 1 nonstop.
Yeah.
And so to see that their music was in here, I was very excited, and it did not disappoint. Before we get into, because I feel like the spoiler wall on this one's going to come pretty early.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about the presentation of this game. We've talked a little about the music, but graphically, I was also pretty impressed with this. And I know I was playing it sort of on my mid-high-end PC, but the character models look great, the world looked great, and especially the apparatus to make tea, I think was just designed so beautifully. It is something that if there was ever a replica that was made by Annapurna or by, by Ivy Road, where it actually made tea, it'd be a thing that I would want immediately.
Yeah, I think that this game has exceptional presentation and sound design, and we'll get to the music also in a minute, but specifically the presentation and sound design, like not only just how the tea machine looks, but how it sounds, how it bubbles, how the liquid moves through, and then even when you're pouring the final drink, you pull like a plunger, like a cord, and it pours it. It spills over, and it's like you can get a perfect pour, and you get like an acknowledgement for it. But
you get an attaboy for that.
but it is inclined for you to not, because also the whole contraption is built in a tree, and as you overfill it, it pours into the tree, and flowers bloom also based on the tea you've made. And so like it's just the whole thing is such a feast for the eyes and ears. And then this game has different seasons. We'll go into that more when we do get past the spoiler wall, but the seasons are gorgeous. Purples, reds, oranges. I love fall. I'm a fall shit. Like I love the pumpkin spice. I love the cool weather. I love a flannel or a cape. Yeah. And like the oranges and the purples in the fall season in this game was like, I took so many screenshots. It's just really like, it's not. The thing about an indie game like this that always impresses is it is graphically impressive, but it also has such a strong sense of design. It's not looking to be photorealistic. It's got a cartoony aesthetic, but it goes all in on that aesthetic in a way that like a AAA game studio might want to just make this look real, or like make it look like the textures don't look real for like photorealism. They look real for this cartoony world, but they still have depth and they still feel solid. And so, I'm really impressed with how this game looks, and ran really well on the Steam Deck the handful of times I played it. It definitely didn't impede the Steam Deck at all, which is also really nice.
Yeah, it always looked like everyone was sculpted like as like a, not an action figure, but as a,
it was like claymation.
You could take the character. Yeah, you could take the characters and you could put them on your shelf, especially Boro and Alta. But the thing that really struck me beyond everything that you've said is also the way that they've treated the liquids. So, when you're making the tea, just the different colors and the different, liquid textures that you would deal with. Even when, later in the game, this is a very light mechanical spoiler, you will then sort of make one section of the drink. Yeah. Let's say almost like pouring an espresso shot. If you're, a coffee person, you put the espresso shot and then you put more on top of it. Yeah. Even the texture and how that changes beyond what you're pouring in your mug was always fun to watch. Also, if you're a fall shit, I'm a mug shit, and so like show me all the different beautifully designed mugs. And if I bring another mug home, my partner will end my life.
Oh, we're in the same boat. We're in the same boat.
So I got to experience virtual mugs, without having to buy more and bring them home.
Oh, there's so many mugs in this game that, because part of what you can do besides like making the tea is you can clean up the shop. You can sweep up dust piles or leaf piles. You can also cut weeds out. And when you do either of those, you can sometimes find a mug and then you can clean it off. Because washing the mugs is part of the system as well, and then use it in your collection. And every time I found a mug, I was like, oh, this one's awesome. Oh, no, that one's even better. There was a star-shaped mug. There was a moon-shaped mug. Like, I have so many mugs to the point where I've actually had to pare down and get rid of some. The only saving grace is that my spouse continues to bring home LinkedIn mugs pretty frequently. And so because they work at LinkedIn and they like free swag. So like, it's not just me, but like I have mugs for a bunch of my favorite podcasts, a bunch of my favorite games, and I don't need more mugs, but I got to live that excessive mug life through this video game.
Mug life. It's the small details, right? It has the whimsy of something that's been Imagineered by Disney.
Yeah.
Especially as you pour the tea by pulling the plunger and just having it go through a glass that is sort of twisting and winding, and the waterfall for washing your dishes especially. That is something that you would see at Epcot. Like that is the feeling. I've not been to Disney World in 20 plus years. But that just felt like it could have belonged in Epcot.
Absolutely. And I mean, the characters too, it's got a very Pixar vibe. I would totally agree with that, like old school Pixar.
Yep.
And that's like, I mean, look, we've talked about Boro broadly, but he's friend-shaped. He's literally basically an oval. He is friend-shaped. And it's one of the best things about him. So like, yeah, but there is this kind of claymation-y, kind of action figure-y, old school CG aesthetic to the characters, while still being super sharp and really impressive. We also haven't talked about the voice acting yet, but like most of the characters don't have a voice. Boro has a chuckle. He often laughs about a lot of things, but he doesn't speak. It's mostly text. But Alta has dialogue both in some of the cutscenes, and then there are moments. One of the other gameplay thing we didn't mention is not only you're making tea for other people, but Boro encourages you to drink and try the tea as well and mark it in your journal. And every time you sit and drink solo, then the camera pans out and Alta speaks in her mind and you can hear her voice, and it's brilliantly done. And like only continues to add to drawing you in because of how brilliantly it's done.
It had, and I don't mean for this to sound like I'm diminishing the game, but it very much it made me feel the way I felt when I watched The Incredibles for the first time.
Yeah.
That is the exact vibe that I got from the character design in this one.
And I do want to shout out Kimberly Woods, who is the voice actress who plays Alta. There are a few other voiced moments. Any of the major cutscenes or story beats have voices. And so there are a few other characters that do get voices in those moments, but I don't want to spoil the narrative stuff. But like Kimberly Woods for me is an actress to watch now. Like every time, I mean, I'm a voice actor nerd, so I love to like remember quality voice actors. I'll play any game that Ben Starr voices at this point. It's why I'm considering the first Berserker at this point. The only reason is because he's the voice of the main character. But like, I think she does such an incredible job, especially with a game that's so emotional and is so deep and reflective. And like, it's so narratively dense that she does such great work with it.
And this is really like they've had other credits in games, but this is like kind of, from the look of it, their first leading role in a game.
Yes.
Which is cool.
Yeah, totally.
Just at a cursory glance. Cool. One to watch.
Yes.
I think this is probably a good point. I know we're only about a half an hour in at this point, but I think this game is all about the spoiling.
Yeah.
And so unless you have anything else you want to say that is non-spoilery, I'd love to throw up the spoiler wall and just get into it.
So there are two things. One, I just want to quickly mention that the music composed by C418 is incredible. And what's incredible about it is that narratively it fits. So if you're familiar with Minecraft and the music in it, it's very sweeping, it's very light and airy and kind of ambient. That is here too, but there is also stuff that is a little harsher. And the really interesting thing is, like the narrative, because there are things happening under the surface in the narrative, the music does that too. I was re-listening to the soundtrack today, and like there are off tones or a minor key when there should be a major key, or these little things that C418 does to like play with the narrative within the music that we get to hear. And it's so really well done. And like, even if you haven't played the game, I encourage you to just go listen to the music, because it's beautifully composed regardless of whether you've played the game or not, though it is definitely enhanced if you've played it.
There's a jukebox inside, or a music machine inside of the tea shop that lets you on a dial sort of move between different animal sounds.
Yeah.
Did that affect, again, because I'm not as big of a music nerd as you are, I know that it affected some of the sounds, but I didn't actually realize if that was more, like, I knew that there was some thematic songs, but I thought it was more sound effect than actual OST stuff. Is that accurate to say?
For the jukebox, yeah. Like, there are songs in the jukebox also that play, but like the stuff that enhances the narrative is stuff that comes either when you're running around outside the shop or during the cutscenes.
And I think you had one other thing you wanted to shout out.
Yes. Are you a tea drinker?
Yes, I am.
What's your favorite?
But I'm a boring tea drinker.
What's your favorite kind?
So as a Canadian, elbows up. I'm a Tim Hortons tea drinker, and so their typical tea is like an orange pico.
Okay.
So I'm an orange pico, a little bit of sweetener, a little bit of milk kind of guy. Like that's my vibe. I will drink other stuff, but my go-to is orange pico. I don't know. What about you?
So I'm mostly a coffee drinker. I drink coffee pretty obsessively. But when I do drink tea, it's an Earl Grey. It's funny, like, and it sounds silly, but like I found out about Earl Grey through Star Trek and through Picard, through Jean-Luc Picard, rather, not Jean-Claude Van Damme, different guy. Jean-Luc Picard, and often Earl Grey hot. And once I started drinking tea, I tried that first and really like it. But I like an Irish breakfast or an English breakfast. My tea has to be caffeinated. I prefer dark teas. But like I'll screw around with like an orange flavored tea or some other stuff as well. And then my go-to coffee is vanilla latte. But I also just kind of like plain coffee as well, as long as there is some kind of sweetener in it, because I can't drink it black. It's just not a thing my brain can do.
Yeah.
And listeners of this podcast who heard our Coffee Talk episode might remember we did talk about our favorite coffees in that one. So I thought it was only appropriate to ask about tea here.
This is why you're here. And this is maybe my moment to throw it out there. And this is blasphemy. And there will be listeners that will write in about this comment. But about coffee, if I didn't say it on the Coffee Talk episode, Dunkin' is not coffee. That's garbage water.
Okay. All right. I mean, I think Starbucks is...
That's like...
Oh, no. I think Starbucks is worse than Dunkin', unless it's like one of their fancy drinks. But,
okay, we're gonna have words about that later.
We'll figure it out. Look, I haven't had enough Tim Hortons to compare, so I can't say anything.
And look, Tim Hortons in the U.S. is different than Tim Hortons in Canada. But listen, this is not a show about Tim Hortons. This is the part of the show where we dive in and we are going to spoil the crap out of Wanderstop. So if you are interested in playing this one, I think we can both say that we wholeheartedly recommend the experience. Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth here, but I absolutely love it. I think it's worth playing, especially if you've dealt with burnout in your life. And we will tell you why in a second. Matt, is that kind of the vibe for you as well?
I absolutely recommend it as well. I think it's also a good first-time video game for someone. The mechanics don't ask that much of you. It's very narratively driven. It's not super-duper long unless you take your time like the game suggests. I have complaints about it mechanically, but none of them are stuff that I think impedes the game as a whole, just personal preference and what I was looking for. But I absolutely recommend it as well. And I think, especially if you're someone who has dealt with any form of a mental illness or mental divergence or burnout or stress or anything like that, this game addresses a lot of those things, and I think is worth experiencing.
Menu system, is that kind of one of the things? Because the menus trip me up a little bit sometimes.
The menus are not great. It's mostly that like the gameplay towards the end, and we'll dig deeper in the spoiler section. I eventually was like, I want more story. I don't care about how complicated this TN. But that's, I think, more of a personal preference with these kinds of games, unless something the game did wrong.
Yeah, it's once you sort of thrust me into the end, I don't want to make more teas. I just want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so if the game for me was 10 hours, in the last 90 minutes, I kind of wish there was just a little bit less tea making so we could kind of get to the point. But beyond menus and that sort of last 2 hours, wishing it was a little condensed to get to the story beats, those are my only complaints about this one.
Same.
Do you feel like you're the only person in your circle who wants to go deep about video games regularly?
We were like that too, until now.
Welcome to Crossplay Conversations, the brand new bi-weekly topical video game podcast from Luke Lewis,
Joseph Hooper,
and Jacob McCoy.
With many years of breaking it down separately on shows like the Left Behind Game Club, Player Podcast, and Lukewarm Games, the gang is finally coming together to publish their gaming group chat in audio form every other week.
Expect roundtable reviews of the latest games, profiles of upcoming indies, and insightful conversations about essential topics in the video game industry. All with a mostly positive, insightful, and fun style.
Help us out by subscribing on your podcast platform of choice to get the first episodes delivered straight to your feed.
And follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos for updates about the show.
Cheers and happy gaming.
Do you find yourself playing older games and wishing that there were new discussions about those games? Enter Tales from the Backlog. Hi, I'm Dave Jackson, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest to break down those games that may be stuck in your ever-expanding backlog. Each episode looks at one game in depth, focusing on mechanics, story, music, and other aspects with no spoilers until a clearly marked spoiler wall in the middle. If you've played the game, go ahead and climb that spoiler wall and enjoy in-depth story discussions, and if not, jump out when we warn you and maybe go play that game for yourself. We have over 100 episodes in the feed, everything from Disco Elysium to Tunic to discussion episodes about how to get into horror games, and if games actually need to be fun, or if they have more to offer. I guarantee that there's something in there for everybody. Once again, that's Tales from the Backlog, available wherever your podcasts are found.
Okay, it is spoiler time. Given that this is a game from Davey Redden, I went in with expectations of something screwy was going to happen here.
Yeah.
Friends of ours were saying, there's a twist at the 3-hour mark. There's something that happens. And I would say that the game didn't really get me until I got about halfway through, or like I got to maybe hour 4, where I realized, oh, this is what the game's about. I'm here now. I get it. Yeah. I don't know how long it took for you to realize that something was afoot.
So, I mean, pretty early on, I had figured it out. I had known mostly what the game was about. It wasn't until the cut scene where you finally go and meet your trainer, the person who is going to make you a better warrior, and everything that happens there, that I went, okay, now we're actually dealing with it. Now we're actually facing it. Because the early parts of the game, so the whole first season, Alta is basically in denial. Like, oh yeah, I'll do this. I guess I'll relax. Yep. But really all I want to do is get back into that forest, find this trainer, and become the best warrior ever again.
Because you and Boro have the absolute opposite affects. Alta is a character who is grind, gotta be the best, sacrifice everything to be the best, and Boro is just, is almost fine. Like, Boro is about boredom. Yeah. Like, he is, and I don't know if that was deliberate or not to call him Boro for boredom, but he, at least in the end, makes a comment that, boredom's okay, and I'm just here to manage my tea shop, and, what happens outside in the forest and outside of these, tree walls is whatever, man. I'm just here to bring people tea when they ask for it. Totally different yin and yang. And for me, it was, weirdly enough, the moment where the corporate folks kind of came in, where that's when I realized, I'm like, oh wait, hold on, I recognize what's happening here.
Yeah. A part of it also for me was just like seeing myself in so much of Alta, and we'll get more into that in a minute, but like the opposites of what Alta and Boro represent, and then the fact that there were more similarities than we initially thought. I think also the first moment that I thought there was going to be some kind of more Davey twist was the first time. So when you finish the season by satisfying all of the requests of each customer, and once you've satisfied all their requests, they stop speaking to you. And it feels off-putting at first because they just won't talk, and Alta can't figure out why. And I was like, aha, here's the twist. But then Boro comes and says, no, when folks come here and get what they need, once they don't need anything anymore, they stop speaking, and then we go interact with the shrine, and they show you the mechanic to like move the story forward. And but I did think something was up on a more like meta level at first with that, but it turns out it's just kind of like the enchantment of the forest, and less like, there's a bigger thing here. But it was very weird because like Gerald, my favorite character in the whole game, the knight dad who just wants to impress his son, wearing a suit of armor with a necktie, a collar and a necktie, actually. Well, I really liked his interactions. I really liked that story. He was one of the first characters to charm me. And then when you go back to him the last time, he just doesn't talk to you, and you start to panic. Like, did the curse get you? What happened? Why won't you talk to me? And because Alta was panicking, I of course was panicking. I don't know if you know this about me, Jacob. I'm a little bit anxious, a little bit of an anxious person, and so. But I'm sure that was by design, is the game to make you go, wait a minute, what's going on here?
And it's through that you kind of figure out that it's not explicitly said, I don't think, in the first little bit, but then I think it might be Boro who essentially says, like, the forest will show, or you figure out or intuit that the forest selects a person or focuses on a person, and then everything sort of revolves around them.
Yeah.
But it really just like, you peel back the layers as you go, where, oh, you find out that you have to go to the shrine to move time forward. Oh, wait, the forest is actually here to, move me forward or change me in a specific way. And then you also find out every time that you, move time forward using that shrine, you end up in what seemed like a dreamlight state at first, back in the forest, running, doing the same thing that you did. You mentioned sort of the vignettes at the start of the game, but then there's these running sequences where there's a very clear split screen where on the left, Alta is running in black and white, and then the whole right side of the screen is sort of blacked out, and that's where you see your dialogue. And you do have choice, but it's choice that really doesn't matter. It's really like choice to just make you think, because a lot of the time it's either, hey, will you like take a break, take a chill, or are you just going to keep going? And as you get that repeated through time, your answer might change based on what you do and what you learn about both yourself and Alta.
Yeah. I mean, the really interesting thing is very early on, so those moments are voice acted, but it seems like in the beginning it's a conversation between Alta and someone else. That someone else turns out to be like Alta's inner drive, or like the inner voice that pushes her. And what's interesting is her inner voice has a voice, but Alta, the character you're playing that's running through the forest, it's silence. You read the dialogue. It's not spoken. And I thought that was really fascinating in the way that we all have a voice in our head on some level that kind of either is, for me, it's the same voice that pushes me to go forward is the same one that also talks me down when like I am feeling self-conscious, or like, that voice in your head that yells at you, tells you you're stupid, you screwed up, whatever. And this is that manifestation of that voice. And the game brilliantly grows that character as well. And this game is a game about burnout and what it's like when you can't control your own drive and you can't stop yourself from spiraling because all you want to do is do more work. A thing that Jacob and I cannot relate to at all.
It's truly just this automatic part of you that says like, no, I have to be productive because my value in society is my productivity. This is me speaking. My value in society is productivity. Therefore, if no productivity, therefore no value, must keep going. And so that's kind of what I identified with, or that I identified with in this game and with Alta. But what I love is that there's just so much symbolism and there's layers that I'm sure as we're speaking, there will be layers that you really resonated with, that I really resonated with. For example, one of the ones, one of the characters in the third chapter, if you consider like the first chapter is sort of your the introduction, the second chapter is the first time where you decide to like move the seasons forward. One of my favorite characters was Ren, and Ren is a warrior who has essentially been trying to find, or just by happenstance knows who Alta is, and essentially like wants to learn from her. She says, hey man, like can't pick up my sword, can't help you out. They have a moment where it does not go well, where he's disappointed and leaves, and then comes back and he's lost a limb. Yeah. And I think of this game like on multiple different fronts, but if you think about this game even like from an industrialization standpoint of like when you start the game, we're almost in the like Model T, the start of the industrial age, and then we sort of move as time goes on. Not only is that like that there's value within the narrative between the two of them, but you can even think of that as like, oh, men went away to war in the World War I and World War II, and came back as different folks. And then later in the game, like we get into like the more corporate, 1980s, 1990s, 2000s. I was really resonated with that, not only because of the devastating loss there, but also how I thought about that on a timeline of American history.
It's funny, like, first of all, typical Jacob, to his favorite characters, the jacked, handsome, shirtless warrior guy.
Hell yeah.
So on brand.
Hell yeah. Wearing a mask. Mysterious.
You're just so predictable. But it's funny, the thing I identified with Alta during the Ren experience more was something that I've seen more and more recently. Look, I am by no means famous or well known, but within our indie circle, I appear to have a folks know me for the work I've done, and I am known within the space, and I'm grateful for it. Whether it's 10 people, 20 people, 100 people, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Grateful to be able to collaborate with all these folks. But there's a moment between Ren and Alta. Ren is a fan of Alta's. Like, Ren became a fighter because of Alta, and is just so invested in why she's here, what's going on. And there's this conversation that happens where he is gushing at her, and she is just overwhelmed and is like, I can't do it. And then he's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Just go get your sword, obviously. And like, the way that there's a lot of talk of parasocial relationships within the podcasting space, friends versus just people you know online. I try to not make assumptions, but there are definitely people I have met that I know you have met at PAX or in Discord that are like effusive in a way that is not harmful, but is definitely makes you uncomfortable. And most of those people are perfectly nice people. And if in those instances, when I've said something, mostly it's been fine. But like, there's something about that effusive praise that sometimes makes me want to just shrivel up, like, and disappear. And Alta has that moment here with Ren. And then he keeps pushing her. When he doesn't get the answer he wants, then he becomes the more aggressive kind of fan that we see that much larger folks in the industry, or more well-known folks in the industry, mostly femme-presenting folks, get. Whereas, and this is a mask-femme dynamic, he just becomes overbearing. Like, what do you mean you can't fight anymore? That's unacceptable. And like, starts to get angry because this person they idolized didn't turn out to be the way they thought. And we see that all the time in life. And I've thankfully not been on the receiving end of that extreme, but I have seen it happen to other people, and it definitely made me uncomfortable because I was like, "Oh, I know what this feels like, and I don't like this. This is pushing buttons."
I didn't even think of it from a gender perspective of large man comes after femme presenting person, and it can be overwhelming. And that's what I meant by the layers to it, where each person will have a different interpretation here, what they focus on. But because of the way it's written and the richness in the writing, everyone's interpretation is correct, or what you took away from it is it still holds true.
This is very much a game about what it makes you feel, not what makes someone else feel, but what it makes you feel. What's interesting to me is stuff that I didn't expect that I got kind of clobbered by was like, so I mentioned it in the pre-spoiler section, but you can take moments as Alta almost anywhere in the field and in the facility to sit, drink a cup of tea or coffee. To spoil that now, you do eventually start making coffee, which made me very happy. Like unreasonably so. Anyway, and also the largest coffee beans in the history of coffee beans. Huge. Anyway, so when you do that and you reflect, again, the camera pans away. You can no longer see Alta. It's as if you are Alta looking out. And those are some of my favorite screenshots to take. The beautiful look of the scenery outside. You can sit in front of the fireplace inside. It's great. And this is where you get most of Alta's backstory. You find out about her family, her parents. And there's a moment where she reflects about her dad. And for those who may not know, I don't mind sharing, I lost my dad last October. And there are good days and there are bad days, but I can already feel it in my face. I can feel what I felt then. She starts reflecting about her dad and this thing, and that they never saw eye to eye. He was a good man, but this thing he did was really pathetic. The way he reacted, this thing was, and it just absolutely hit me in the chest. And I like started to tear up. And I had a great relationship with my dad. I'm sad about how it ended. The last few years were kind of a nightmare because of medical stuff, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but like, I had a healthy relationship with my father. It wasn't perfect, but I had a healthy and good relationship with my father. But still, this moment of Alta reflecting about her dad, who wasn't perfect and she didn't seem to respect, at least in this moment, it still got me. And to someone else, that stuff that could have like just blown right over, right? If your dad's still alive, or you have a good relationship with your dad, or you have a bad relationship with your dad, you might, or whatever, it may or may not have affected you, but it affected me. And I didn't see it coming because it wasn't a narrative burnout thing. It was a Alta reflecting about her life thing.
And there's multiple different threads that you can sort of pull at, because the way that system works is every single fruit, if Alta tries that fruit, there's sort of a different story or narrative that you can get. And so as someone who only played for 10 hours, I think I maybe went through 6 or 7 of the different fruit.
Right.
But I don't know if you went through and you collected or, heard each monologue, but there was probably at least 2x that.
Yeah, I didn't hear all of them, but I think I filled out, I would say, 2/3 of the book. Part of me wanted to complete it, but funny enough, the another thing that's really interesting about this game is the achievements. So it's the easiest game.
Oh, yes.
It's the easiest game to platinum because you get them over time. They just unlock over time. There are no specific requirements that I can tell. It's just as the narrative progresses, you get certain achievements, and the achievements have a name, and then the description is like a poetic thing about burnout, about life, about whatever. There's nothing in those achievements that has anything to do with what you unlocked in the game. It's masterful. And like there was a point where like I was posting on a Discord about it, like, anyone else get some of the achievements? They're wigging me out a little bit because they are very meta almost, like talking to you, the player, which is another brilliant stroke. And it's the only, like, I have this on PC, not PlayStation, but I'm tempted to play it on PlayStation to get my first platinum trophy on a PS5 because it's really easy. But it was also another thing that I noticed that was really brilliant. And I was like, oh, this game is just kind of coming at you at all angles. But that said, yeah, I didn't get all of them. I wanted to, but like you said in the pre-spoiler section, by the last couple of hours, I just wanted the story. I wanted the resolution to the story. The tease got a little more complicated. There were reasons for it, and it was interesting why they got more complicated. But like the last couple of coffee orders were also really complicated. They were given by a character you are meant to find obnoxious, so that's why they were so complicated. Even though that character is really interesting, something I clocked on that character is she has similar, I don't know if it's just a design limitation thing, but she had similar tattoos to Alta, that vendor, the old woman.
Yeah, Nana
had similar tattoos to Alta, and I thought Monster, who's this young kid you interact with, also had markings on her arm, I thought. So in my brain, I don't know if it's canon, but I was like, are these versions of Alta's psyche that we're interacting with? Because it's never clear. But the ones I got, some of them were comedic and just kind of goofy, like her reacting to the flavor or something. And then some of them were really introspective, or like her like reflecting on herself and her performance, and then like being like, no, I just needed to work harder. I was sad and pathetic. Like a lot of self-deprecation in this game too, which is something I am no stranger to as well.
And to go back to the achievements for a moment, they also oscillate between they're not severe or not dark. I don't want to say they're light, but some that just sort of come off as like, so much time, it will be okay. You have so much time. And even the icon is like sort of bright, all the way down to stuff that is a lot more dark. Stuff like one of the final ones where it's called Your Moment. You were not ready, but it was your moment all the same, and it's sort of a burning candle. Yeah. So I think it's one of the first times where, at least in a long time, where achievements made me feel, but only from a like what the hell is going on perspective.
It used
like that's almost the most Davey Reddin thing about this game is how the achievements pop and how, hey, as you recover, none of these achievements matter. Yeah. Maybe you should remember that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think in a game where you're designed to take your time and shouldn't be rushed, I think it's a brilliant way to do it. I mean, I used to be an achievement hunter in the Xbox 360 era. Every game I got on Xbox 360, I needed to 100%. I haven't done that in a long time. I have other things to do besides 100% games. I know tons of folks who platinum games, and I get why, and I do miss doing it, but it's just not a thing I do anymore. That's not a thing that drives me like it used to, but I love when they're used in a clever way, or they enhance the game in some way, whether it's mechanically because you want to try and attempt certain like score chases or whatever, or in this case where it becomes kind of meta part of the narrative, like they're speaking to the player directly.
I mentioned this a little earlier, but we, with the businessmen, the businessmen were sort of one of the things that I immediately recognized like something was going on, and the businessmen made me think of the layers here, because that is the moment when coffee gets introduced. Yeah. So immediately I was like, we move from this beautiful, tough craft of making tea to something that is more like the orders get more standard. You have to like clean a dirty object, and all of these folks like don't care about the taste at all. And then beyond that, there's, usually when you make tea, you do a single pull, and then you'll make a different tea for someone else entirely. And it's one of the first times in the game where you really like could pull a coffee for one businessman and then use that same pot of coffee for somebody else, which, like, again, so layered of, we don't care about the craft anymore. Corporate America is like a theme here. But then you also have this beautiful spectral being that is almost, in my mind, like, I almost thought of them like the hippie back in like the 60s, 70s, whatever, and then just succumbs to, hey man, this corporate America thing's kind of cool, right? And then just completely succumbs to and conforms to every other businessman there.
Yeah, so that's Zenith, who's this galactic character that swears to help you break out of this loop, like, because she can travel in and out of the forest at free will. I use she, but she is they are non-gendered. The creature, the character Zenith.
They almost seem like they're a multiple. They're almost like the Borg, sort of.
Right, they're an eternal entity. And
they are we,
and they are here because they love these businessmen. They're obsessed with them and wanted to see what they were seeing. And to me, I took it as art versus business. Like, because also, I think I read somewhere that this game also has parallels to game development, right? Davey Wreden had made 2 incredibly huge games, technically 3, because the Stanley Parable Deluxe is sort of a remake / sequel. Won't get into it, but like, so this is framed as like also like the struggle of making a follow-up. What's my next game going to be? How do I make a game? And this part of the game felt like that conflict, right? You have these businessmen who are hilarious, by the way. They want this coffee. You don't make coffee. Zenith creates a coffee bean in the garden for you so you can make them coffee. And then once you satisfy them, they do a business presentation, some about other business presentations. Like, the writing is some of the most heartfelt, serious, sappy stuff. And then also some of the most non-serious, ridiculous, goofy stuff. Like, it can do both and does it well, which is also, again, Davy's bread and butter, right? The Stanley Parable and the Beginner's Guide both have equal parts humor and devastating heartbreak. So this is no different. But that whole moment was just like, and then her slowly, every time you go out into the forest and come back, they change a little more into another businessman until eventually they're a businessman that just has a faint glow, but they don't recognize you. And they just also want coffee and also want to do a presentation. And then eventually when you bring them their coffee, won't even talk to you anymore. That's the end. Like, it was really interesting because I thought we were going to get some kind of closure with the narrative or what felt like kind of like almost a time loop a little bit of also always getting stuck here. But then even it also, I think Zenith is a metaphor for there is no magical fix. There's no magical fix to burnout. Someone's not going to just come in and save you. You have to save yourself. Like, burnout is a thing that you have to face because you're, in most cases with burnout, I'd say in all cases, for the most part, you are doing it to yourself. That's not all. Like, if you're working for a company that overworks you, burnout can also be caused by that. I would look at devs who maybe are, crunching. That is burnout. That is not induced by you. But like, burnout is a thing that you have to reckon with emotionally, at least, even if you can't fix the situation. And I think this was like kind of a comparison to like that magical fix versus that can't fix you kind of a thing.
Man, I hadn't even thought of the parallels to game development. Even with Zenith, the way that presentation is delivered, it is a bad version of corporate presentation. So is that sort of a metaphor for a game dev who tries to fit in the box that a gaming executive probably wants to put them in, and they're frankly like not living their own truth and bad at it? Man, you could take this in so many different interpretations.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to here. I mean, I think the thing to me that really hit really hard, and it's meant to be a hard-hitting moment, is when Alta finally confronts the trainer of legend that was going to teach her to become a master swordsman. When you finally can reach her, and you're chatting with her, you ask for her to train you, and she tells you no. She says you're not, because she looks at Alta and says, I can tell you're not. You don't need to be trained. That's not the problem. Like, and you're not ready for this kind of training. Whatever you're dealing with is something else. And so Alta tries to kill her, stabs her with
Yep.
her with the warrior's own sword. Can't remember the character's name at the moment. And then the warrior, of course, like freaks out, like fights her back, yells at her, and kicks her out. Like, why would you do this? But from Alta's perspective, from your perspective, the player, you don't watch her do it. It goes black, and then suddenly there's a scream, and then you see the results. And but what you find out is you're reflecting with Boro, and you blocked that out. The reason you're here is because that I framed this wrong. You don't finally get to see her. You saw her before ending up here, but you can't remember why. But that's why you can't lift your sword. That's why you're in this spiral, is because you went to the one person you thought could help you, and she couldn't help you. And so you blocked it out.
And you blacked it out like so hard that it almost took like what I took as therapy to kind of get you to finally realize what you had done.
I will say here for the listener, everyone should be in therapy. Not some people, everyone. Even if you are the most well-adjusted, happy, carefree person, therapy can help you too. Everyone should be in therapy, and it should be free, which is more of a problem for me and less for Jacob. But
for now, who knows what'll happen in the future?
But that's my only soapbox for now. I'm sure I'll have others, but everyone should be in therapy. I'm in therapy. Everyone should be in therapy.
The piece that, because I always thought of the sword, this ominous large sword that she worked on with, someone to her exact specification, to me was always a representation of her craft.
Yeah.
And so even if you think of like her craft as the sword, the master that she plunges that sword into, that's essentially like, hey, my craft is better than whatever the hell you can teach me, so I don't need you, even though everyone says I should be working with you to get better.
Yeah, and I think part of it also, like, the sword being the craft and being too heavy to lift is also a great comparison to Burnout, because you think about, like, I think about my own experiences with Burnout when I was hosting 3 or 4 podcasts. I was editing and producing another 4 or 5 podcasts on some level. I was doing all this work. I didn't have another full-time job at the time, but then eventually did get one. And so I was balancing all of that. And every time I started to hit burnout, my brain would just go, yeah, but if you don't do it, no one will, right? Which is, of course, first and foremost, not true. I have collaborators and co-hosts. That was never probably true. But even still, I was like, if I don't do this, it won't get done. I have to do this. And like, I've had hard lessons in the past that have taught me that's not true. My unfortunate biggest solution for burnout is my body gets sick, and my body literally gives out. My body goes, you have a fever now. You're going to be bedridden for 3 days because I don't know how else to slow you down, which has happened many times. But then last year, 2024 was one of the worst years of my life, and it's not hyperbole, but it's the year I lost my dad, and that forced me to slow down. I literally couldn't work for a week. By the end, part of the Jewish tradition, for those who don't know, is that you sit Shiva. I only sat for 3 days because it coincided with a holiday. Technical jargon, not that important, but like, you are expected as the spouse or child of the person who passed to sit and reflect. And so that's what me and my brother did for at least 3 days. And by the 3rd day, I was like, I want to do literally anything else. I'm tired of thinking about this. Friends come and visit. People bring food. Like, it's meant to be communal so you don't mourn alone. But like, that forced me to slow down. But like, since this is coming out soon, this episode won't be out yet, but in the nearest future, in like 10 episodes, I did a side quest about a game that is important to me because I used to play it with my dad and we didn't play a lot of games together. I thought of that while I was grieving. Instead of not working, I thought of a thing I could do for work while grieving. That's part of my process. That's who I am. I am broken inside. But that said, like, burnout is one of those things that I think about a lot. And I have spent many years on the precipice of while doing nothing about it. And that's why I think this game hits so hard, because all of the things that Alta goes through, while it is, yes, quite literally about sword fighting and being a warrior, it is not about any of that. It is meant to relate to the things that you experience as a person, trying to work too hard without giving yourself some grace, peace of mind, or time to stop.
Yeah, I when you talk about that, This Is Why We Are Friends went through sort of something very similar. 2022, had a job that burned me out so hard that I needed to leave that job, and ended up really thankfully finding a new job that is a way better fit for me. Working agency life for those who work in marketing is just the work is the same, or the work is similar, but the expectations and the pressure is just something that I could not deal with, and so it took a lot of therapy to sort of understand that my value is not only tied to my achievement and to my work, but that took a long time. That took a long time to figure out. And so with that, I want to ask you, Monster is one character that we've alluded to but not talked about in detail. That was the moment, like the monster section really brought it home for me.
Yeah.
And it brought it home in multiple different ways, not only from you sort of coming to this same realization around your craft and your value as a person, but I felt like Monster also, if this is like a cycle of, you think where you started the game as you growing up and then you sort of enter the working world, and having a kid, or sort of being around kids and remembering what it was like returning to that childlike whimsy was something that I really appreciated as someone who, does not have kids, but a lot of my friends have kids, and, we're obviously thinking about it. It was something that was really powerful to me, to almost see, as much as she was a little, she was so annoying, it almost made you realize that, like, none of this really matters.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one way to look at it, and I can see that too. I also am someone without a kid. Well, that's not true. I have a furry child named Otis, who is my dog, who I treat like my child, and I will not be embarrassed by that. But like, I have nephews and nieces, of course, though my nephew is now in college, which is and my nieces, oh my God, they're both in college and both can drive. It's very weird.
I'm sorry, you're old.
I am old. I knew this already, but like, it's funny. My nephew, Ethan, my brother's son, plays video games. We talk about video games all the time. Huge Persona sicko. Isn't playing Metaphor because he's also a track runner and like he's training and doesn't want to distract himself with Metaphor, but we'll play it at some point. But like,
smart.
I've hinted that I've talked about this stuff on my video game podcast. No interest. Doesn't care. Their uncle loves their uncle and loves talking about video games with their uncle. Has no interest to hear their uncle talk about video games. Just fine. But it's funny because what I took from the monster stuff is a little different. I took it as Alta confronting her own childhood. Like, if you could see yourself as a child, or not even as a child, if you could see yourself when you were younger, when you first started on this path, what would you tell herself? Because there's a moment where, the crux of the story is Alta fighting her inner voice that says she has to grind harder, do more, that grind set mindset. That is garbage. By the way, we have not said it yet. The grind set
mindset, baby.
Garbage. It's garbage. You don't become successful because of how hard you work. Working hard is part of it, but it's not the only thing. Anyway, you eventually start to fight back against this voice because it's pushing you hard to the point that you don't like. Like, you realize it's toxic and it's not good for you. What gets you there is that when you meet Monster in the woods, what pushes Monster to be destructive, draw on things, be a menace, is her inner voice is trying to cajole her and like direct her and manage her. And she acts out against this voice because she doesn't want to be managed. And of course, Alta sees herself in this. And so you eventually take the voice aside and say, hey, I see what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
You have to trust her too. If you become too controlling, you'll be like my voice that tries to control me all the time. And I've realized I don't like that. And it becomes a conversation with yourself about trusting yourself.
Yep.
And I think that was brilliant. And it's funny. I expect, like, this game, when it did make me cry, it was mostly stuff I was dealing with personally. There was no big, I expected this game to have this big epiphany that burst me into tears, because anyone who listens,
it did not have that.
And it didn't have that. And anyone who's listened to me on a podcast knows I like a good cry. I love an emotional story. But this is more like, what I like about this game is it's about burnout and self-reflection. And the ending of the game is, you, like, the shop is gone. It's you and Burrow in a clearing, and Burrow just kind of, you sharing your final thoughts with Burrow about like what comes next. And then it just kind of ends, because this wasn't a game like Burnout. This didn't have a solution. It had an experience. and what you could take from that experience.
Yeah, and it's I thought Wanderstop as a title I didn't really understand until I kind of got to the end and went, oh, because you get a stop sign at one point during your playthrough, which is a weapon from one of the earlier characters. But, given the fact that at one point the tea shop sort of disappears, I kind of went, it's a place to let your mind wander.
Yeah.
Wanderstop.
Yeah. You stop there to wander.
It's one of those it's one of those burners that get you later. But what I very much appreciate about the writing too there is that they didn't a whole hog say, working hard is bad.
Right.
Don't listen to that side of you at all. I think what they had said is that is one small part of your inner voice that at sometimes you will doubt yourself. Sometimes you will say, hey, I need to grind and work hard. Sometimes you will say, I need to rest. And all of those are valid. And you shouldn't turn one of them off completely, even though in the moment that grind set mindset thing is the thing that got you to where you are here. It is not necessarily turn that off completely. It is listen to yourself, listen to your mind, listen to your body, give it what it needs in the moment. Which frankly is, as a 36-year-old man, is not something that I really understood until a few years ago. So if only this game was out a few years ago, it would have been even more useful than it is today.
Right, exactly.
Focus on what you can control, and everything else is out of your control.
Correct.
That's almost like Boro's whole thing.
But we also, you and I especially, came up in a internet culture and a content creation culture, whether you like that terminology or not, where more is better. The more you do, the better, right? Multi-hyphenates. Most of the YouTubers we know are also streamers and podcasters and do in-person appearances and consult. I think about the person who probably had peak burnout, and it might be why he retired, but mutual person we admire, Matt Pat, often talked about burnout and doing too much, running 4 channels and stepping away. I think that, if you want to there's a difference between wanting to make money at the thing you do or just enjoying the thing you do. And I think when we all start out, there is this culture of I want to be famous. I want people to know my work. But I've hit a point now where it's I want more people to listen. I'm always going to be hard on myself when I don't know, when only 5 people have read my article or nobody said anything or I don't have any comments on an episode. But I've realized now that I'm in an active enough community of independent podcasters that the people who are seeing it are enjoying it. And that has to be enough, whether it's 1 person or 30 people or 100 people, it doesn't matter. But this whole culture around the internet and about creating things on the internet is you release it for free, you make money via advertising, and you just need a big break and interview a big important person, and that'll be it. And as someone who has had several big breaks interviewing very famous people or having incredibly well-known guests, it's not a magic trick. It's not a magic bullet. It doesn't make you famous overnight. Some people get lucky, right?
And look, the harder you work, the luckier you get. If you think of it's like a Ray Kroc-ism from back in the day.
Yeah.
But to a certain degree, it is you do get lucky. The people who do the best, who are the most successful, yes, do they work hard and put themselves in a position to do well? Yes. But is there a modicum of luck that's involved in that too? Yes.
Yeah. George Clooney is a famous actor for a reason. He is talented, handsome. Really, really hardworking.
Yeah.
But he also got lucky. ER was a lucky break. He worked his ass off for it. But that show's popularity made him popular. You look at the cast of Friends, right? They worked their asses off, but they also got lucky. Friends is the most well-known sitcom in sitcom history. They couldn't have predicted that, right? Jerry Seinfeld was a hardworking comedian, but Seinfeld, the show, put him on the map as a household name. All of that stuff you can't predict. You can hope for and want, but there's no magic code to get that. It's not just how good a quality product you make. That can get you pretty far, and it has. And I'm grateful for the work I've gotten. I'm thankful for Jeff's incredible editing on Fun and Games and my own on Reignite. I've worked really hard, but it's not enough. It's the only I think part of it also is, Jacob, I've come around. I think when we first became friends, we were both very much in the indie podcast space. We're still getting our legs, figuring out what we want to do. I now have been doing this for 13 years, and I know I'm good at what I do. I don't have confidence about a lot of things, but when it comes to podcasting, I know I am good at this. Does it stop me from getting burned out? Does it stop me from doubting myself? No, but I do it less now because of years of experience. But you have to get to that point. And the problem is, I think, it was for me in the early days, and it is for a lot of other folks, is you think the way you get there is the 10,000 hours by just doing it as soon as possible. But it's not 10,000 hours in 20 minutes. It's 10,000 hours it's 10,000 hours. You have to take that time and work that hard while giving yourself the proper breaks, understanding, and moments to learn and like grow. And I think that's the greatest thing this podcast gives us, and I will then stop ranting, is you need space to grow. That's growing the seeds, growing the plants, literal space to grow. They talk about a grid to grow these plants and give them certain space so they grow into certain things. Like everything's a metaphor. And I think that that's a thing that folks forget when they want to make stuff. And it's very easy to get caught up in the numbers. Man, I'm sure it's the same for Jacob, but I look at the numbers of downloads of my podcasts and all I do is get upset, even though they're great numbers, but they're not the numbers I thought, hoped, want, whatever. Like, and I think this game's greatest story, like detail or narrative beat, is that it teaches us to slow down and to think.
I think that's yes to all of that. And I sort of started my educational journey with an undergrad in business. And then sort of, we talked about the art and the business later, went to radio school and then got an MBA. So I have this like art and business sandwich that is my life and my existence. And so whenever, the 10,000 hour rule is something that I thought about a lot when I read Outliers, when I read Malcolm Gladwell. It was something that I was just like, I need to do it and do it as fast as possible and just get really good at it. And the faster I do 10,000 hours, the faster I can be the Beatles. But as I sort of, continued my journey and then started to deal with more folks who are focused on the arts, then sort of the Ira Glassisms of it came in where, you will make the saddest part about making art is that, and this is not exactly what we're talking about here, but like the saddest part about making art is what's good after you listen to a little bit or you figure out or you're in it long enough, you steep in it long enough, what's good, but you know that you can't make good. You make bad and then you make better than bad, and then at some point you will just make good things. But the thing I want to get to, if I'm thinking about my journey with craft and with burnout, I really moved to like the ikigai, like the Japanese concept of like your raison d'etre, if to Anglophone Frenchism, but essentially it is like, what do you love? What are you good at? What can you be paid for? And what does the world need? And like, depending on where you are on that graph, sometimes you'll come up with something that is your passion or can end up being your profession. But eventually we should work to the ikigai, which is, a combination of all four. It is like, what do you love? What does the world need? What can you be paid for? What are you good at? The middle of that is that. And you may oscillate from that and get into something that's more of a vocation or a profession or passion, but you'll eventually get to an equilibrium, which is the ikigai. This game's a thinker, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
even the concept of seasons. I mean, we didn't talk about one of the things that I took away of, this game has seasons where you just time sort of snaps away because you don't even get to see. One thing that I was almost expecting to see is the seasons change as time goes forward. You just almost snap into a new season. And like, that reminds me of the times when you just get really busy and you're running, you're not focused on yourself and you just lose time. And so I think that the game represented that really well too, of, you gotta focus on yourself. You have to focus on more than just, your craft, your profession, your vocation, because like you only get one life and time's going to evaporate if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that you and I face often, along with a specific group of friends of ours. We see each other twice a year in person. Sometimes we're lucky and we get to see each other more, like when you crash in New York for 24 hours on my couch.
Yeah.
But like we see each other at the PAXs, sometimes at like if you're coming to New York for another thing or I'm going somewhere, like we can link up. But the reality is we only hang out in person a couple times a year. And you and I have gotten better at texting and interacting and chatting, but for the most part, it's like, and I cherish these kinds of friendships. Jacob and I could not talk for 6 months, and the minute we see each other, best friends, it's like we never missed a beat. Yep. And that's what the seasons really represent to me, is like when that time passes, the more things change, the more they say the same, right? And like, I think that, you know, especially the kinds of stuff that you and I do in the content creation and video game space, it can sometimes feel like we're just going from beat to beat without thinking about the things in between, right? Like, you and I have both had some pretty big life moments in the last few years that have made us stop for a minute, but they were not what we intended. It's how life worked out. And I think the season changes and the reflection is to remind us, like, just because things are moving fast, you can stop anytime. There's not a right time to stop. You can stop whenever you want and whenever you need, but you have to recognize that, or surround yourself with people who will help you recognize that. Because I think something we haven't credited enough is Borrow is that friend that's saying to you, hey, take a break. Maybe take a minute. Think about yourself. Maybe just make some tea, watch some TV, take a nap. And I think he's encapsulated so well. Like, boredom is a luxury. If you can be bored, you have some level of privilege and of some kind of wealth. Like, you may not be rich, but like, boredom is a luxury. And so I think this game wants to remind you, like, boredom isn't a bad thing. Being bored can be a good thing. Letting your mind wander can be a good thing. And this character was created to be the embodiment of that friend or colleague who's like, hey man, you need a minute. Maybe take a breath.
Yeah. And also reminds you at the end of the game that, you know, we're in a world of continuous improvement where therapy is not a stop. Therapy is a journey.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't stop the journey just because at one point you feel like, hey, I can pick up my sword again.
Yeah.
I think that's about as good of an ending for this podcast as I could muster. So unless you had any final thoughts here, I think we're gonna close it off on the Wanderstop front.
Yeah, I think my last thought is, if you made it this far through all the spoilers and you still want to play the game, you absolutely should.
Yeah.
While I think this is a game that the less you know, the better, I think the difference between this and, say, a Before Your Eyes or a 1,000 Times Resist is that I think this only becomes, like, even if you know where it's going, I think it's still worth experiencing. Not to say those games aren't either, because if you've been spoiled on Before Your Eyes or 1,000 Times Resist and you still haven't played it, go play those games. They're great. But like, this is one of those games where I think it warrants discussion. This, like, I'm doing this again on another podcast later this week. Yep. Like, and the host of that show basically went, good, it's going to be a 2-hour therapy session, which basically, yes. I think that if you were still curious about this game, you should absolutely go play it. It is not my game of the year, but it is definitely one of the best video games I have ever played. And I think it is definitely because of how it made me confront and think about burnout, a thing that I still struggle with to this day. And to be clear, there is no fixing burnout. There is relieving it and it recognizing it, which is the important part. You will never be free of it if you are someone like me and Jacob, and I know some of you listening are, because I know some of you folks personally. There's no solve for it. There is acknowledging it and being kind to yourself. So I think the only thing I have to leave you with before Jacob wraps things up is be kind to yourself. That should be the lesson that this game teaches you, is be kind and take some time.
I think of my own stress a lot of the time. For those fans that have watched Arthur back in the day, there's an episode with Francine where Francine deals with her, I guess what I would call rage. And all the time she'll, a pop bottle is shaken and it just builds and builds and builds until like she just explodes. And that's kind of how I think about myself in that respect, where it builds and builds, not rage, but stress builds and builds and builds, and without the right tools to deal with it, your head will pop. So I guess this whole thing to say, just go to therapy, man, and play Wanderstop. It is one of my favorite games of the year, and I don't foresee a world where this is not on my list at the end of the year. You mentioned another podcast that you'll be doing. That is a podcast that we are big fans of, that you may have heard as an ad on this show. That is going to be Tales from the Backlog. So if you're listening to this when it comes out, that is actually coming out next week. But if you're listening to this after April 16th of 2025, that episode is available. It is with Matt. It is with CG Danny B, friend of the show, as well as Dave Jackson. So please check that out if you want more talk on Wanderstop. Matt, thank you so much for coming. I was like, we'll go 50 to 70, and it's almost 90 minutes. Classic us.
Yes.
So folks want to find you on the internet. Where can they do that?
The best place to interact with me is either on Discord. I'm in the Left Behind Game Club Discord. You can find me there. Or you can go to Blue Sky. I'm djstormageddon.com on Blue Sky. Yes, I have a fancy URL, so I am using it as my handle. Money well spent, I guess. But Blue Sky is where I'm most interactive. I don't go to Twitter anymore. It's a hell site. I don't use other social medias. I'm on Twitch as well. But also, if you go to that URL, djstormageddon.com, you will also find my link tree, which has my podcasts, my Patreon for fun and games, my merch store, my Twitch stream, all my socials, the best ways to reach me and find me. That's where you want to go. And, maybe take a break.
I love that. Take a break is something that I will also reiterate. Matt mentioned the Discord, where you can find them. It's at leftbehindgame.club/leftbehindgame. Oh man, leftbehindgame.club/Discord. We are also on Blue Sky, leftbehindgameclub.bsky.social. You can find us there. If you enjoyed this show, do us 2 favors. Send it to a friend, because that's how people hear about new podcasts, and give us a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice, because it truly, truly helps. You can find me on Blue Sky at jacob.bsky.social. I've got the Jacob. I've said it before on this podcast, and I will say it till I die. I got the Jacob. Ha ha ha. But if you're going to be at PAX East 2025, you can find Matt and I there if you're listening to this in April. And if you're listening in April, you can find they're letting me do my shtick, my video game trivia shtick, once again. So come find us in the Bobcat Theater on Saturday, May 10th at 7:30, featuring some lovely folks. We mentioned 2 of them, Dave Jackson, CG Danny B, who are going to be on the podcast with Matt, next week, alongside Dan O'Mac, Steve Saylor, Trina Smith from Gamerheads, and then Lightweight Gaming from the Trophy Room. So come find us there at PAX East, give us a high five, and we can talk about Burnout together, I guess. That is the end of our episode, and that, my friends, is one less game left behind.
Video games are a unique medium.
They can tell stories,
Immerse us in strange, fantastic worlds.
blur the very boundaries of our reality.
But at the end of the day, video games are fun. Whatever fun is to you.
I'm Jeff Moonen,
And I am Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
and on Fun and Games, we talk about the history, trends, and community of video games.
It's a celebration of all the games we play and all the fun we find within them.
And there's so many more games out there, so we hope you'll share in that conversation with us.
Fun and Games podcast with Matt and Jeff. Find us on certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
And happy gaming.